Welcome back, folks. Today I wanted to discuss with you why a lot of times shooting can be more of a mental game than it is a physical game. There are all the physical aspects of shooting that we have to get nailed down, those I talked about in my last video, as far as the principles of marksmanship. But there's a lot of mental aspects that go into this game too. So I wanted to go over those with you today. Forgive me, I've got my notes here off to the side because I tend to get a little sidetracked. So you'll see me referencing this. This just has my notes on it. So, why do a lot of people struggle with shooting? Well, the first thing is a lack of the basic principles of marksmanship. And that's one of the reasons that video was one of the first videos that I put on my channel. I want that to be one of the founding principles of what I discuss here as far as the principles of marksmanship. Without your marksmanship, everything else fails. It doesn't matter how nice your rifle is, how nice your handgun is, how much money you spend on whatever you put on it. None of that matters. But sometimes a lot of people can say, well, hey, I'm doing these principles of marksmanship. I've got good grip. I've got good stance. I'm doing my breathing control. I've got decent trigger control, but I can't seem to stay consistent. Yeah, I'm hitting my shots, but I'm not always hitting my shots. Well, that indicates two things, one of two things. It's either you change something in your fundamentals or your mental fortitude isn't there. Consistency is key, and with every shot we take, we need to be doing everything the same. And we do this through a mental process. It's our mental check of our principles of marksmanship. If you're not checking these, if you're not thinking about them every time you do it, that's when they begin to fail. That's part of why some of this is a lot of a mental game rather than a physical game. Now, these things coincide together. They don't, it's not all one or all the other. They work together in harmony to have both the mental and the physical aspects of the game down. So, I want to go over our mental process, and you'll see a lot of overlaps from our principles of marksmanship video, and that's okay. This is meant to drive a point home. So, our mental process is my stance correct? Is my grip correct? Am I properly supporting the weapon? Are my sights correctly aligned? Do I have my sights presented on target appropriately? Is my trigger pull smooth? And am I following through? These are all things we must consider, but these aren't even close to all the considerations that we have when taking a shot. Every battle is won before it is ever fought. That is a quote from Sun Tzu in The Art of War. And the same principle applies here. Every shot was a hit or miss before we ever pulled the trigger. It's all about your mental process and are you executing your physical duties correctly? So, what can we do to correct this? Well, the answer is not just plinking away at the range, and there's nothing wrong with plinking. You can learn a lot from plinking if it's meaningful plinking, but if you're just mag dumping into trash, probably not going to get too far. And I know that seems to be a hot thing to do nowadays is mag dumping into trash. Why I don't know, but such is life. But we need to be slowing down and going through every step of our mental process, every step of our physical process, making sure that we're not missing any of these steps. Again, this is where your 22s come in. Go in and get this stuff down. Make sure that your mental process aligns with your physical process. You might be inclined to check your grip first, but if your mental process is your stance, then you're not aligned correctly. You need to make sure, all right, build from the base up. Mental process. Is my stance correct? Make sure your stance is correct. Is my grip correct and am I supporting the weapon? Make sure these things, what you're doing and what you think you should be doing, make sure those are in line with one another. Shooting in theory is simple. It's not a difficult task, but it's when we start to lose sight of these mental processes and when we start to lose sight of our physical processes that our shots can start to suffer. We want to make sure that these mental processes that go along with our physical processes, and again, I'll remind you of them and I'm going to reference my notes to make sure I'm telling you them in the right order: stance, grip, Sight alignment and sight picture, those are the same, or they're not the same, but they go together in the same point. Breathing, trigger control, and follow through. These are the things that we need to have down pat. Your mental process and your physical process should include all of these, and you should be in harmony on this. You'll hear people talk about going to the range and, well, I had a bad day. Well, yeah, you did have a bad day, but why did you have a bad day? The reason you had a bad day is probably because your mental process wasn't in line. Unless you just forgot the principles of marksmanship and how to pull them off, it's your mental process. A lot of times when you say, man, I really don't know why I missed that shot, that's your mental process. Your mental process is key. Your physical process is key. Hear me, I'm not saying that these two are independent of one another. They need to work together, but there needs to be both. You can't just say, well, I have my physical process, because if you don't have a mental process in play to keep checking on that physical process, you're going to falter, you're going to fail, you're going to miss things. You're going to miss your target, ultimately, is what you're going to do. So you need to have this mental process in effect. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be nailed down. It's the same process that I use, that I learned years ago when people were teaching me how to shoot. They taught me the principles, and then they taught me to check on myself. Now, they didn't call it a mental process, and I'm sure other people call it different things. I call it a mental process. That's just me. You call it whatever you want, so long as you're doing it correctly. So remember, folks, our mental process, our physical process, both of these align with our principles of marksmanship. When we can get the three of these to work in harmony together, this is when we start getting good results. This is when your accuracy improves. This is when your marksmanship improves. And the big thing, this is when your consistency improves. Consistency is key. I'd rather see a shooter who hits 8 out of every 10 targets every single time than to see a shooter who on Tuesday, yeah, he hit 10 out of 10, but on Friday, he hit 3 out of 10. I'd take that consistency any day, every day, for any reason of any sport. It doesn't matter. You need to be consistent, and that's where your mental game plays into a big, big role here. Mental, physical, principles of marksmanship. If you can't tell, there's a theme here, folks. If you do things differently, if you have a different mental process, maybe you use different fundamentals of marksmanship, a different way of explaining it. Hey, that's great. Head down to the comments and let me know about it. But until next time, this is Chuck with Practical Marksmanship Reloaded.